Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Rural Scoop. I'm Melissa Sadorf, and today I'm honored to welcome Dr. Greg Wyman, Superintendent of the J.O. Combs Unified School District and author of the Substack Celebrating Traditional K-12 Public Education. Greg has championed rural leadership by centering human connection, innovation under the hashtag Forward Initiative, and strengthening the rural voice in education. As he approaches retirement after more than 4 decades of service, we'll explore his leadership journey, his writings, and the stories he believes that rural communities must amplify. So, Greg, welcome to the Rural Scoop.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm glad to be here.
Well, to get us started, would you just introduce yourself to the listeners and share a little bit about your background and your journey into where you are now?
Sure, Melissa. I've been doing public education in Arizona for 40 years. Started out as a teacher in the Tucson area at a large high school, did biology and coached track and football, and then decided to make the move up into administration. And that started part of my rural journey. I went down to a small district down on the border, Patagonia. I had about 100 kids, K through 12. And I was there for a couple of years. Then I went up to the White Mountains up in Northeast Arizona to Snowflake. I was principal of high school for 1 year there. And then I became the superintendent for 5 or 6. That was a rural school district of about 2,500 kids to 2,800 kids in my time there. Then moved down to the big city, took a job at Apache Junction as superintendent for 4 or 5 years. District about 6,000 at that time. Moved over to Tempe as assistant superintendent, which was a district of about 10 to 12,000 at that time. And then went up to Payson, another rural community. We had about 2,500 kids there. I was superintendent there for 5 years. And then down in Combs, this is my 7th year here. We have about 3,700 kids, and we're right on the border of what I would say be suburban and rural. We're in Pinal County next to Maricopa, so we kind of are bridging that. Are we becoming suburban, or are we still a little bit of rural? So it's a diverse background that's given me 25 years of superintendent level experience and a perspective that just thought I'd share.
Yeah. And I appreciate that because you and I have been colleagues for a number of years, and it's fantastic to be able to have you as a resource for those of us that are in the field right now, because you have had a lot of diverse experiences. So I appreciate that about your background. So your leadership has been rooted in 2 very simple, but they're powerful truths. And that is, treat people how you'd like to be treated, and show that you care before asking anyone to listen. So can you talk a little bit about how those have shaped your leadership in the communities that you've served?
Yeah, I think it becomes important that people don't understand. So much of the time we focus in traditional K-12 education about results. But the reality is if you don't have people working with you and for you, the results aren't going to come. If you have them working with you and for you, you'll get the results that you want and need. And so I pattern myself in many ways based on those individuals in my life, coaches and teachers and leaders. And in some ways, I pattern myself against those that I thought were not very good, as opposed to those that were very good. And what I did is I made a promise to myself that I would never treat people the way they treated people. And that became foundational for me. I've lived in a lot of places in my life. I've probably lived in at least a dozen to a dozen and a half communities from the time I was a kid growing up. I was in a mining family, and we moved from South America to Canada and points in between. And so in many cases, I was the outsider. I came from a large family, and so I always had my brothers and sisters, but still you're an outsider, and you're an outsider And so how do you enmesh yourself into that community, that culture? The same thing happens when you change organizations. And the way I've found that you can do that is by building trust through showing compassion and caring for the people you work with. And it's not a single event. It's really just every day that you do what you say you're going to do and commit to doing what you say you're going to do. And then you build that trust. It's kind of that analogy where you got a stick on your shoulders with a positive bucket on one side and a negative bucket on the other side. If you don't fill up the positive side, one negative can tip the balance. And so it has to be that daily interactions with people that you work with in a positive vein, talking to them, taking care of them, caring about them, that fills the positive bucket and make sure that you get what you need done. And when you create that environment in an organization, then you'll get success. However you want to define success doesn't always translate to the way everybody else wants to define success. But some people have asked me legacy. I'm not really big on legacy. What I am is if people believe that I treated them the way they needed to be treated, and they wanted to work for me, then to me, that's what matters, and all the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So you're modeling those values for your leadership team, and really it's becoming a part of your district culture in the process.
Yep. And I think when you're in rural communities in particular, because your position is so high profile, it becomes critical that people understand that's who you are, so that when parents come to meet with you or city leaders come to meet with you, over time you've established that that's who you are, and then they can come to trust you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Because in a small rural community, even a larger rural community, that becomes critical. And with the public education system being the center of that community, they have to be able to know that you are going to be the person that you say you are, and that you're going to deliver in the way that you say you're going to deliver, because that's what will be successful. We passed the bond up in Snowflake probably the first time in years. Well, I didn't do the bond the first year. I did the bond the fifth year because I spent 5 years building the trust in the community, right, so that they would go ahead and know that they were going to get what we said we were going to give them in terms of their facilities. And people were shocked when we passed it by, I think, 66 or 67%. But it was, how did you do it? Someone asked me. Well, it was 5 years of constant building trust and building positive in the positive bucket to go ahead and get passed. And I think that's what you need as a rural leader.
Right. Can you share an experience from your early days as a leader that might have influenced how you see leadership, especially in a rural school district?
I don't know that there was an incident or a situation in there that defined it. I think really what I did was what I naturally did, but in reflection after the fact is really more that validated what I was doing. And the simple thing that I think lots of us do is writing personal notes. I used to type up a note when I was teaching after every track meet to thank the people for putting on the track meet, stuff like that. And then something happened when I was just really a teacher breaking into the profession. And I was oversighting a basketball game and we had an incident and I took care of it. And the athletic director who hadn't been there wrote me a note saying thank you. And it was a handwritten note and it made all the difference in the world for me. And so I tried to carry that through when I became a leader. And then when I talked to some of the people later on or saw the notes that I wrote people and they were sitting on their desks, or parents came up to me and said, thank you. The note that you wrote my child was really important. It became a validation of what it takes to make people feel important and cared for. I've had some administrators tell me that you always cared for all of us. And that's probably the validation that said, okay, then what I'm doing is right. And we may not be perfect in everything we do, but we're on this world for a very short period of time. And so relational capacity is far more important than any other thing that we do. And many of the programs I brought into school districts have been really more about relational capacity and building relationships than it's been about X's and O's of how we get better test scores. Because if you don't have the relationships, the test scores won't follow.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Shifting gears just a little bit, the #Forward initiative. Can you tell us more about what that is, what sparked it, and how it reimagined learning in a growing rural district?
Sure. For us, and I won't take the full credit for that because it was here before I got here. We started in I think 2017, and I showed up in the school year 1920. It's a framework and a foundation for what we need to do and the way we work with our kids. And I think that's the piece that's missing. I've likened it to this analogy all the time. Do we want to play playground ball or do we want to play organized ball? And so when you sit on the playground, you're never sure what the rules are. So we talk about football. You're never sure what the rules are. You're never sure who's winning. You don't know what the positions are. People just run around throwing a football. Or do you want to be organized and there's a framework that says this is the offensive line and the defensive line. Here's the rules. Here's how long the game is. And I think that's what Modern Teacher did for us. It took a framework and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I don't know that there's any one framework that is better than any other framework, but it is critical for us to have a framework. And so whether you want to use Marzano's work or Daggett's work or Modern Teacher, it doesn't really matter, but there has to be a framework. Otherwise, everybody's just doing what they want to do when they want to do it. And so #Forward, the framework of Modern Teacher, they allow every district to name that movement what they want. They named it #Forward before I got here. But really it was taking a look at 6 different drivers across 7 different stages and kind of working your way through each of those stages, through each of those drivers by completing what they would consider indicators of success. And it gave a really good framework. When I got here, I had put in other programs, but what I realized very quickly is they were bought into it. So it's a whole lot easier for one person to change than have 600 employees to change. So we went ahead and stayed with Modern Teacher. I could have looked and said, I think this program's better than that one. But the reality was the buy-in was there. And so I'll make the adjustment to make sure that we continue to do it. And it's a lot about student choice and student voice. It's about looking at different ways that kids can learn. It's about not just being a stage on the stage, but actually working with individual kids and giving them a chance to grow in the manner that they think they need to grow. We have learning plans, individualized learning plans that help kids take over ownership of learning, but make sure that they're meeting the goal that they need to meet to get the results. Mm-hmm. And we think over time, I don't necessarily like the letter grades as a marker, but in the last 5 or 6, 7 years, we've gone for a full letter grade up. So if we were on average GPA of all of our letter grades of 2.1, I think we're now at 3.2. So there's something that's happening there that works. We have a uniqueness in this district that we flip over about 25-30% of our staff. So it's an ongoing effort. If you're in a stable district, like I've been in some rural areas, it actually can have even greater results because you're not constantly trying to retrain and you can actually build off of what you learned at the beginning. So
that leads me to my next thought, which is really you're talking about human-centered leadership. And, you've said many times that your focus is on keeping students and staff known and respected. And that falls in line with what you're talking about. What does that look like and feel like day to day in your schools?
I think day to day, it just means that we hear and listen to whether the staff or the students or the parents, that we created an environment that's welcoming, that if you have a problem and a concern, that we'll address it. We may not always give you the answer you want to hear, but we will sit down and listen to you, and then we'll go try to find a solution to the problem. And then we'll be upfront, open and honest with you. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's working with your staff or working with kids or working with parents. It's that personal touch that reaches out to them that says, thank you for what you do. It's all of those little day-to-day and tangible things that make that difference. And I think you can tell when you walk into a organization, I don't care what the organization is, you can tell what the feel of that organization, what that school is. And if you don't have it, if you have people that are at the front desk that are grumpy, don't have a smile on their face, it sets a tone right away. So we try to work on all of those types of things and create that environment so that people are saying, hey, I want to be here. I want to be here as a kid. I want to be here as a parent. I want to be here as an employee. And that I think becomes critical. taking an interest in what's going on. So being at the activities and events, not just, especially in the rural setting, not just at the school, but at the community. So you go to the pancake breakfast, or you go to the 4th of July parade, or, you do all those things. You immerse yourself in what happens at Pace. And one of the things that I really loved is when I got to the homecoming parade, it kind of not be as big as it should be. Well, by the time I left, that parade stretched the full length of Main Street from front to back. And we had everybody involved in making floats. The district right away, we said, well, it's just the high school. I said, no, it's not. It's the entire district, including the district office. So we made floats. The elementary kids made floats. We brought partners in from the community. And I think it's that kind of thing that says, hey, we're embracing all of you and inviting all of you to be part of us. And again, it's not just when you show up to school to find out what's going on with your kid. It's also all these other events that take place that are just critical for rural schools to thrive.
Yeah. As you said, really the heart of the community.
Yep.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit on you, Greg, and I want to ask about your Substack, because you use it to celebrate public K-12 education and additionally to counter some of the harmful narratives that are out there. So can you talk a little bit about why storytelling is so vital right now, and how do you see what you're doing influencing policy or perception?
I think it's important, and we all in this arena walk a fine line, the political line. And so I was trying to figure out a way to walk that line. But at the same time, there's a reality that's out there relative to school choice. And I'll just call it school choice, meaning both vouchers or ESAs, charter schools, micro schools, homeschooling. I'm not against choice per se. The difference in this country is that choice today is being funded by the taxpayer versus the parent. And to me, that's fundamentally different. And so if you're going to take taxpayer dollars for it, then you should be having to go ahead and run by the same rules that all of us do. And we know that the school choice movement has fairly deep pockets in it from a variety of different individuals, and they control a large portion of the media. And so whether it's a Betsy DeVos or it's Koch brothers, that communication is well-timed, well-positioned, and well done. And so in order for us to counter that, there has to be a voice out there. And so we don't have the $1 billion backers in public education, what I'll call traditional K-12 public education. And so it became a point when I found Substack, and I didn't know much about Substack until about a year ago, that it was like, here's a chance to write and say what I have to say. I'm no consider myself a writer. Wasn't really sure what I was doing. I was trying to find a vehicle that kept the political line there, so that if I stayed on the positive, then it might be easier for other people to share, restack, write messages or whatever. And I could put it on LinkedIn. I could put it on Blue Sky, and I would do all of that as a way to get the message out there. And I think more of us need to get the message out there, because the message that's out there is not accurate. But in the absence of anything else, that's all people hear. And so our ability to message the great things, because I've been in enough districts in my life, you've been to those districts, great things are happening every single day. We get this image of what's supposedly occurring, but the reality is people are people. I've lived in, like I said, communities from South America to Canada or points in between, and people are the same everywhere. They're just trying for the same thing. They want the same thing for their kids. They want their kids to have a better life than they did. They want their kids to have a great experience growing up. And that's what's happening all the time. Do we have little nuances here and there where someone does something stupid? Sure, because we're humans. But that doesn't color the whole thing, not what happens day to day. And so unless you get in our schools and see what's going on day to day and see how amazing these kids are, you miss out on something. So I'm just trying to maybe shine a light on that as best as I can as we move forward, because I came into education 40 years ago on the heels of a nation at risk. And if you really look politically at what's been going on, that that whole notion of what was said back in 1983 has morphed into different arenas, but is the same messaging, and that is the system isn't working, and it's a lie. It was built on a lie. It talked about how we weren't working we weren't being successful as a country in terms of our test scores, which is a bogus way to check on success.
Yep.
But then we adjusted over to parent choice. And then we put in some woke culture and all this shifting, but it's still based on a lie about what's really happening. What's really happening in our schools is what's happening everywhere in this country is good people are working hard to take care of your kids every single day and don't buy into the narrative that that's not happening. But when the narrative gets repeated so often, we have people just accepting it as a truth as opposed to understanding what's really going on. So I'm trying to counter that as best I can.
Yeah. You had a post recently called Restacks where you critiqued the legislation on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. What drove you to speak out and what's at stake for rural schools in particular in these policy debates?
You know, I just talked to someone the other day and they asked me if I was concerned about like the DEI stuff. And not really per se. I know what we're doing in our schools. And so the ability to continue to do what we've always done is there. What really concerns me for the rural schools or any of the schools is the financial piece. Mm. Because when we sit here and say, okay, we're going to take Title I dollars away, probably not. Why? It's too political. Too many legislators or congressmen deal with that, so they're not going to get it. But if you get a Title II, which is just PD, we'll go ahead and take it away. And all of a sudden, when you ask me about hashtag Forward Modern Teacher, that's a lot of what we fund that program out of. So if you take that away, I just lost the funding for the foundational piece of what my district's all about. If you take away migrant funding, or if you take away ELL funding for many of our communities that have migrant or ELL as an issue, how do you help those kids get better? And so I think that's the real danger. And it's not just if I take it away. How many of us scrambled this summer when it was frozen and then it's unfrozen, but now it's going to be frozen. And that chaos makes it very hard because the reality is we have day-to-day things that we need to do. The other piece that's a real concern to me is the macro level of SNAP benefits and Medicare. And so those kids are coming to our schools, and when they don't have a place or food there because there's less money coming into the system, or they don't have food on the weekend, or they don't have healthcare coverage, and so they come to school sick because they don't have healthcare coverage, that ancillary issue comes front and center and impacts all of us in the school system. So I think some of the political stuff about woke and indoctrination grabs a lot of headlines. To me, it becomes more a money issue and the impact of how kids and families survive in terms of like feeding and Medicare, or healthcare. That's far, far more important. And how do you overcome that in a rural community? If you're in a rural community and you shut down the hospital,
yes,
where do you go? Where do you go for that hospital? And that's the things that what happens when that kid gets hurt at school and there's nowhere to go. And it'll be a slow, because it's projected over 10 years that you're going to lose that health care. But that's tremendous. You add in, I'm not going to get into the debate on vaccines. People can have their own opinion, but you add in some of those and you get some fundamental shifts that will make a difference when you have a whole bunch of kids coming to a school and you have to deal with those kids and you have to help those kids, and you see them every single day, and you see the kid that's hungry because they didn't get a meal over the weekend, or you see the kid that's got a health issue and can't be taken care of. Those kids, those families.
Yep.
That's my concern. This other political piece about what we do and don't do is just stuff to throw in the air that people will look at. I'm worried more the day-to-day operational stuff and what it really means to kids.
How can educators stay informed and involved with these legislative conversations without feeling overwhelmed? Because there is so much information coming at them from multiple sources and things change very quickly. You have any advice about that?
I think it's the old Nike commercial. Just do it. I mean, you have to do something. And so yes, it's a corner that you're just one piece in the puzzle and you're just working that little piece. But if we're all little pieces of the puzzle and they come together at some point in time, it makes a powerful difference. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We got the billionaires throwing money around. We got a system that doesn't necessarily help out. We're working like crazy as it is, putting in X number of hours a day. But if you can just do your little piece, something, this podcast, it's a chance to get a voice out there. Well, it's just Melissa's podcast. But if there's 25 or 35 or 45 podcasts out there, maybe someone sees one or two of them and starts to understand a little bit better. If there's 25 or 35 or 40 Substacks out there, and if I repost something or I start a thread, sometimes it's not just enough to read. It's that you got to start a thread in a conversation. Are you going to get the trolls? Are you going to get the negative people out there? Yes. But I think it becomes that case of just providing information. And within your day, you got to figure out a way and a time. And quite frankly, we all know this. Different times in your life, you have more time or less time, depending on what's going on in your life. But I think in the absence of putting anything out there, then there's only one voice out there. And I think that's what's hurt traditional K-12 education is for too long, there's been one voice predominance and we have been disconnected. I like to say this, I've said it in my career and we have to be careful, but we all want to play politics, but we want to keep our gloves nice and clean and white. Well, the other guys aren't keeping their gloves nice and clean and white. So it's okay if we want to do that. And I understand we have Republicans, Democrats, and independents in our districts. And so that's where I'm coming back to say, just stand up for what you do. Don't get into Republican, Democrat, and independent. Stand up for what you do and who you are. And if everybody would stand up in their own little way, it starts to make a difference. If we stand up in a small rural community and we get that community's turned, then does the community next to that community get turned? And then does the community next to that one get turned? And it's not an overnight issue. It's a long, slow process. We can talk about school choice. Well, school choice started in 1983. It's almost a 50-year process to get to the point where the federal government now says we're going to let people use tuition waivers to send kids. So that was a 50-year fight. So we're not going to overturn this fight in a day and a half. We're going to have to do that. But if we're waiting for somebody else to do it for us, then we're going to be waiting until the end of time. Well, we have to do it for ourselves. And it's very hard because we all have a uniqueness to who we are and what we do. And sometimes we get caught up in who we are and what we do so much that we can't help the other guy out. And I think we have to start coming together in a shared voice, and finding the positives and sharing those positives, because they're out there.
Mm-hmm. Let's step into that proverbial ring around choice. And because you've written about the need for accountability in charter school administration and the financial transparency. How do you balance ensuring quality of education with retaining the flexibility that rural districts need?
Again, I think sometimes our markers of quality are the wrong markers. And so we're so caught up in chasing a marker, so letter grades and test scores, that we forget all that stuff. I'll just use myself as an example. I wasn't the brightest light in the northern sky when it came time to schoolwork. I don't consider myself the best teacher on the face of the earth, so I consider myself a good leader. I think I get people to follow me. But if I look back at what I thought would happen after high school or what I thought would happen after college, what I did after college was know that I could work hard because I got a double major. That was only through hard work because I was willing to get up at first thing in the morning and take a couple extra classes. And so hard work will carry me. And so I think we have to realize that it's really about what our kids are going to be fine. For all the nuances about, our kids are going to be fine when they grow up. They will find their path. Some will take longer than others. When they find their path, if you taught them to think and care about other people, they will find the knowledge that they need to be successful in their career. We keep thinking that we have to give them all the knowledge down here at high school, like that's going to make them successful. High school is about completing a journey and learning skills to complete the journey. And the fact that I didn't get to trigonometry and math doesn't mean I can't ever do trigonometry again the rest of my life. It may be that at a later time in my life, I decide that that's what I want to go because I have a path I want to take. And so we get caught up in numbers instead of getting caught up in really how are our kids doing and how are our kids making it. And for all the conversation about choice, I don't care what school you're in. What does everybody talk about? The sense of family within that school, the caring attitude within that school. Why do parents consistently rate their local school, doesn't matter which type of school, better than nationally or statewide? Well, because I don't know what's going on over there, but in the nation, I hear it's terrible. So they must be doing something terrible. But our school's pretty good. Well, everybody in the country is saying our school's pretty good. So where are the bad schools? Now, are we perfect? No. But I think we forget about that. If you don't have that sense of community, which you get in the rural schools in particular, that's what's going to make the difference. If you don't build those relationships so that you have connections when you come back to that community, if you come back, that's going to make the difference. You will get the nuts and bolts education. But we're so focused on this notion that a letter grade at a single point in time on a single year is going to determine what you do the rest of your life. If that was the case, then everybody around the world would be valedictorians, and that's not the case. And so I think we forget about that. I think we're too caught up in that arena instead of getting caught up in really what's the important parts and helping these kids manage their way through life, just like we help our colleagues manage their way through life and be there supportive of them when they need us. And the rest of the stuff will come. And there'll be ups and downs because that's life, but the rest of the stuff will come. And I think we have to keep that in mind, and we've lost that perspective as a country. I mean, the whole lie of Nation at Risk was where we ranked in terms of test scores.
Right.
We never ranked high in terms of test scores because that's not what our system's set up to be. Our system's set up to give every kid a chance. That doesn't happen in every country in this world. And so when we are there for all kids, the common good far outweighs something like test scores. And we've gotten away from that at times. We have to work on all people and lifting all boats, not focusing on just a few.
Yeah, agreed. Greg, you've been advocating, and you're a strong voice at the state level, and I know at the national level too. Can you share a time when telling your district's story or your leadership story impacted a decision that was being made, whether it was at the state level or even the local level?
Sure. I think it's back to the relational capacity. I had two bills that have passed in my career that have turned into law. And in both cases, for those that were from Arizona, if I told you who the legislator were, you probably would have thought, well, Greg, you're on the other extreme from that individual. But because there was a problem that individual was trying to solve, and I had enough of a relationship with that person, I could go ahead and say, well, have you ever thought of this? And I gave a solution. And based on the solution, she modified it a little bit. She ran with it and got it passed. So then the next year when I come back now with something I want, she's willing to work with me because last year I helped her with what she wanted. And so in the first case, it was letter grades and how we do some things with letter grades. In the second case, it was changing the amount of time that middle school kids in Arizona must be in instructional minutes. It was 1,000 hours, which was far exceeding anything else. We got to change back down to 890, like third, fourth, and fifth grade students. But it was that relational capacity that allowed us to work together that made the difference. And so I can be snarky and aggressive at times, but at the same time, you still want to build those relationships because you never know when you're going to have to work with people from different sides of the aisle. I was part of a group that helped work several years back where we got a massive increase to funding in Arizona. But again, it was a combination of both Republicans and Democrats working together along with education, along with, and so it's bringing those different groups together. And so no matter what you do, what are we back to? Relationships. We can have our disagreements. We can have those fights. They don't have to agree with everything I say. They don't, all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, it's back to relationships. And if you want to get something done, You're going to have to build those relationships, and you build them, and they may not come to fruition for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but you still build them.
So if I was a leader and I was just starting out my advocacy journey, and I am resonating with what you're saying, what do I need to do to start to replicate that? How do I get involved with relationship building or with getting in front of people that I might be able to tell my story to?
First of all, make sure you have the knowledge base. I think sometimes, it's ready, fire, aim. So understand what it is that you're actually looking to do. And before you get started, what is your solution? As superintendents, it's the same, no different for superintendents versus a legislator. Everybody's got a complaint. Everybody will tell you what they're doing wrong, but don't just bring me problems, bring me solutions. And so I think it becomes that initial piece so what am I really fighting for? And I used to call lobbyists that I respected a great deal when I first started, and I would call them up and say, first thing in the morning, do I need to get excited about this? What's really happening? Because in some cases, the die's already cast. So know what you're trying to do, but also understand the dynamics of what's happening down, in this case, the legislature, because in some cases, it's either going somewhere or going nowhere, and getting all excited every single time. You can only get excited so many times and get upset and get angry. And then when you get that foundation, then you just start going to the legislature, going down and just listening to what's taking place, introducing yourself to who your representatives are, and taking some time out to talk to them. Branch out. You may be at a setting and your representatives are busy. So introduce yourself to somebody else. You don't know the connections. I have a representative right now that's not in my area. She does a wonderful job. I knew her from 15 years ago when she was in a totally different arena, and we were working together. Well, I make sure that I reached out to her several times as she was running for her position to say, I'm here to help you. So build those relationships, because you never know down the road. If you want to be in the game a long time, you never know when these relationships are not going to come back around. And so when you build those and you have your solution and you understand the game that's being played, then it can't be, probably in my younger days, it was too much of this for me, but it can't always be the sky is falling. At some point in time, it has to be, hey, have you ever thought about this? And I will tell you, the bill for middle school instruction minutes was 3 years in the making. Mm. And the first 2 times I took it, I took it to people that I felt were supportive of K-12. And they took it and they wanted to change the entire system. So it went nowhere. I was like, but then all of a sudden I found someone who just wanted to change that one little number in the law, and it got done. So I think it's that don't give up. If you believe in it, don't give up, but make sure you know what's going on and make sure you talk to these people. And that's sometimes easier said than done. But getting to know them, and also, quite frankly, know your lobbyists, talk to your lobbyists, know other people that may be in a different position. A mayor, if you're in a small rural community, know your mayor, talk to your mayor, talk to your city manager, because they have political pull too. And again, you may be bringing different pieces of the puzzle together to get what you need done, but also understand it takes time. If you're in year 1, you might get something, but more than likely, you're going to be looking at year 5 or year 7 or year 8. That's the key piece is if it's worthwhile, keep fighting, keep learning, keep building relationships, and you'll eventually get success. But if you're thinking it's all going to be in year 1, 2, or 3, you're probably going to be sorely disappointed.
That's true. That's true. In your writings, you often highlight successes, which is fantastic to be able to read about. How do you intentionally celebrate those wins, whether they're big or small, both in your schools? And why is it important for us to be thinking about that as rural leaders?
What I do is, it depends on how the idea comes to me. So in some cases, the one I'm writing for this week, I read an article that came out that was very negative. So I wrote to trash the negative and then spun it to positive. In other cases, something will happen and I'll come up with something that's very positive that occurred in my district or in the state. and I'll start from that and then look to see some cases it'll just stay on the positive. Other cases I might swing in some of the negative. But I'm a firm believer in what we do as public educators. And so it's not hard to find positive. It's never, if you really looked at the fact that we are, as I said before, the common good, worrying about every single kid, it's really not hard, but we have to put it out there. And the reason I put it out there is because of the negativity that's out there. So we always frame it back to the positive. Flip your brain. Are you optimist or a pessimist? And you can always flip to an optimist. So how do you do that in a way? Because I, as the reader, or I, as another educator, if I want to share something, it's easier to share positive than negative.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I don't get in the political line, because how do you argue with something that's positive? And I can probably build on something that's positive. So that was a very purposeful decision. And the reason why I named the Substack newsletter what I named it was so that it gave those of us that are in political positions a way to share something by focusing on positives. You need to pull something out. You can pull the positive pieces out, match it to what you have with your district, and then move that forward, and still point out the disinformation, the false narrative, whatever it is you want. But I always try to bring back to the positive. I never know what it's going to be, but again, there's so many positive things that are happening in our schools. There'll always be something that we can celebrate. So let's focus on that celebration.
Yeah. And that's evident. And I appreciate that about your writing.
Thank you.
So, Greg, as you prepare for retirement, how are you thinking about mentorship and succession planning to ensure that all of the things that you have going on in your district, that momentum is continuing?
Well, we will move forward with the superintendent search. Obviously, that becomes a board decision, like we all know. And so what I've learned is that we have it positioned for a way that I think might be good, but I'm not the decision maker, so I have to let that go. So what I really look at is more that while I was here, I gave 120%. And I believe that there'll be things that I've done that will stay, and there'll be things that I've done that won't stay. And that's okay. And then, so for me, I'm really more forward looking than backwards looking. And so I'm really saying, so how do I continue even in retirement to try to influence K-12 education, traditional K-12 education?
Yeah.
Because someone will come in, it's their time and turn to do what they need to do in this district. I can agree or disagree, but they're in this moment in time, so let them have their moment in time. I'll continue to say, okay, what can I take with my knowledge that I have and try to build on that for as long as I can. I think it might be some writing, but it may or may not be. I might say enough's enough. I'm going to do something different. It may be that I step away, but I believe I have something to offer. And now it's really just trying to explore what is that something that I can offer. And hopefully there's a message in there that a young administrator can look at and say, okay, that makes sense. It's more of that kind of piece more than anything else. I'm not done. I'm just a day-to-day grind. After 40 years is time to do something different.
Sure. What advice would you give for somebody that is either in a leadership position right now looking to move into the superintendency, or they're an aspiring leader, especially those that are in our rural communities? What would you tell them to be thinking about or to be doing?
I've told people a lot of times, if you want to be a superintendent today, or you want to be a principal today, you can be one. Mm-hmm. If you want to be a principal today and you're going to stay in that small rural community, you may never be a principal. And so at some point in time, and I use myself, I thought I wanted to be a football coach, head football coach. I tried for a number of years to be a head football coach. I had an opportunity to be a head football coach, but I would have to leave Tucson and move up to actually southern Utah. Wasn't ready to do it. Never took the opportunity. As soon as I decided I wanted to be administrator and things didn't work out where I was at in Tucson, I moved to Patagonia. I moved to Snowflake. I moved to AJ. So if you want it, you have to go get it. If you're going to put a limitation on, you're going to say, I want it, but it has to be this town, this school district, this, whatever, that's okay. But depending on what's going on, you may never achieve that goal. If you want to be a leader and make a difference, you can do it tomorrow, but you may have to make sacrifices. You may have to go ahead and take a chance. You have to make your own way. If you're waiting for someone else to make your way for you, you're probably never going to have your way made for you. You have to reach out and grab the brass ring and do what it is you want to do. And I think sometimes a lot of excuse for why you never got to where you got to, but at the end of the day, you weren't willing to make the choice, and that's fine. Your family situation or any other number of issues may have said, I can't make that movement at this point in time. That's okay, but you have to realize that if you really want it, take the chance and go after it, and you can get it. People don't realize. They say, well, what have you been doing? Well, I was a superintendent in Apache Junction. The board and I didn't see eye to eye, so I became an assistant superintendent because my contract wasn't renewed. In a 5-year period, I applied for, in 4 states, 60 positions.
Wow.
Before I became a superintendent again. I've been told no so many times, it had its spin. But if you want it, you'll get it. I could have quit after the 1st, after the 10th, after the 20th, after the 30th. I could have quit at any one of those points in time. But I didn't, because my goal was to be back in the superintendent seat. And I think that's a piece. If your goal is to be the principal, or your goal is to be an assistant principal, or whatever it is, then don't ever give up on it, because the moment you give up, then I guarantee you'll never be that.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that. You have grit and resilience for sure.
Or stupidity, depends on who you talk to.
No. So looking ahead, you talked about being forward thinking and future driven. What does rural education look like to you 5 or 10 years down the road? What changes or opportunities do you believe that rural communities should be looking to seize if they want to make sure that their places of learning, their schools, continue to be equitable and vibrant and really what we want them to be for our students?
Probably the biggest thing is you're going to have to do more with less. Oh, I shouldn't say it that way, because depending on what state you're in, there may be a different story. In Arizona, we've always had to do more with less. But I think you have to look back to problem solving and saying, so how do we do more with less? When I was in Snowflake way back when, we did a whole piece with thin client devices and mainframe servers, which was pretty radical at that time. But the reason for it was we didn't have enough. We couldn't afford to replace all of our computers across the district. So a thin client would come in at a third or a quarter of the price of a regular computer. The mainframe could house all of the software, so you didn't have to load it automatically to everybody. So there was a way for us to push things out. We were looking to try and figure out how we're going to expand our bandwidth. Everybody thought we had much greater bandwidth than we really did. And so we came up with an opportunity when in the old days, the school facilities board was doing some things, and I got them to really do most of the background work. But it's those kind of things where you have to be looking for a solution that's truly out of the box. And just remember, any solution that's out of the box is inside another box. So there's no such thing as totally outside the box. But are you willing to look at things different? Because if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And when resources diminish, that's when it becomes harder. And so you're going to have to figure out how do I create those partnerships with my community to make a difference? How do I create partnerships with non-traditional groups or companies that maybe are not even in your community that you can find a way to make a connection with to help you out? And so if the financial model changes, it might be a little bit different. Some of those smaller rural districts don't get hit with school choice the same. I'm in a suburban area. I only capture 30% of my kids. And so I have the same financial difficulties as other places because I'm losing most of my kids. But it's still a mindset that says, okay, given what I've been given, what do I do to make a difference? And how do I make that difference? And in that case, I'm going to have to take a risk. Some might work, some might not, but I'm going to have to maximize what I have coming in, because my kids in my community, irrespective of where your community is, deserve the same as kids in any other community, especially affluent communities. So how do I maximize that and come up with an idea? And I think for rural, that's going to be the people piece is always going to be there. The relational capacity sometimes is easier in small rural communities. It's sometimes harder because family fights go back, the Hatfields and McCoys go back a lot of years. But the relational capacity is a little bit easier. But now how do you do more with less on some of the other things? How do we make sure we have current what our kids will need when they go out into the real world? And can we give them exposure to that currency? And that's where you're going to have to do more with less.
Yeah. Well said. So here's the question that I ask all my guests, Greg. What does the term rural advantage mean to you?
I'll keep coming back to the same thing I've always said is relationships. I grew up in small mining towns in the middle of the Atacama Desert in Chile, up 40 miles from a large town in British Columbia, Canada, as well as another small town, probably 80 miles from Reno. And so when you have those small towns, you have a chance to make lasting relationships with people. You have a chance to get to know people and get to understand how things work and how to get along with people. And I think that piece is the advantage that rural schools have. That can't always be, if I'm going to, I'd use when I was at a large high school. When I started at that high school, I taught and coached, and there was 1,600 kids. If I waded into a group of kids, let's say there was a fight, I could glance around and say, if some kid tries to cold cock me, there's a whole bunch of kids who know me, and they'll protect me, and they'll come in. When I left, we were at 3,000. When I walked into a crowd of kids and something was going on, and I scanned the faces, I thought, ooh, if somebody jumps me, I'm in trouble. And so you don't get that when you're in the small, because everybody knows everybody. That's the rural advantage. You still have people that do things they shouldn't do, but you're now connecting with someone one-on-one, and you can have a real conversation that maybe sometimes is lost in a bigger setting. And if you can do that, you can solve your problems and you can work together. There may be the big problems that fundamentally you're on the other side from them. Okay, we've spent too much time focusing on the large things. It's the small day-to-day things that you can solve if you know the person and can look them in the eye and can talk to them. That's the rural advantage that you don't always get in the big systems. And that'll always be there, and that will make a difference no matter what. That'll make the difference. It can be a pain because of the family dynamics within a small community, but it'll always be there as a positive if you want it to be a positive.
I love that answer. Well said. So, Greg, I want to thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom and your unwavering commitment to rural schools. I appreciate your time today.
You bet. Thank you. It was fun.
And for our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode of The Rural Scoop, please take a moment to share it with others, to like and subscribe, because those of us that care about rural education, really, this is a place where we can share our stories together and learn from each other. We'd also love to hear from you, so make sure that you leave a comment or a review and tell us what resonated most, and join the conversation on all of our social media channels. So the more we connect and share these stories, the stronger our collective voice becomes. Until next time, keep leaning into the rural advantage, because when rural leads, we all rise. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.